Welcome to Talking Giants player profiles and projections. And today we have the big cat, Leonard Williams, 6'5", 302 pounds, 27 years old, just signed a 3-year, $63 million contract with $45 million of it being guaranteed. Coming off of a career year with 57 tackles, 11 and a half sacks, and 14 tackles for loss. Career highs for both those. Justin, we actually fought on the PPP of Leonard Williams last year, but you were saying, hey, this guy, he's going to be someone that Giants fans really like by the end of the year. There's not going to be this negative connotation around Leonard Williams by the end of 2020, and it might be your best take of all time.
That's exactly how I was going to lead the show. I've been doing this for a hot minute, hot sec, and there's a lot of takes out there in the treasure chest of takes of Justin Panic, but I really do think trying to get as many people as possible invested in Leonard Williams is kind of like my best take. So yeah, the eater of tuna hearts, Leonard Williams, big cat, had a really, really great year. I'm proud of him. I'm proud of myself. I'm proud of him because the writing was on the wall from 2019 that 2020 was going to be a really good year. And Bobby Skinner, I'm just going to get to it. You read some of the basic stats, and we have some of the more advanced stats too, and we have similar notes we have. But third in the NFL in QB hits, and this is sometimes I'm just talking about out of all pass rushers, out of all players in the National Football League, third in the NFL in QB hits last year, tied for sixth in tackles for loss, seventh in the NFL in sacks, second behind Aaron Donald for interior defensive linemen, tied for sixth in QB pressures, fifth in QB knockdowns. And guess what? 74% of the snaps, which was the least in his career besides 2019, where he was transitioning from team to team with the Jets and the Giants, et cetera, et cetera. So 74% of the snaps
games too,
and only played in only 15 games. So let's even just break it down from this standpoint too. Leonard Williams, 11 and a half sacks, 30 QB hits, 42 pressures, and this is all according to Pro Football Reference. If you're a listener to the podcast, if you're listening to every episode, you know what I'm about to say. But when you combine the 9 Giants other edge rushers that they had 9.5 sacks, 17 QB hits, 55 pressures. So the only difference there is the 13 pressures that 9 players had more than our best pass rusher and 1 player. That's insane. Williams had 28.75% of the team's sacks. He had 25% of the team's pressures, and he had 28% of the team's QB hits. He was really good. He was really productive. He deserved that contract. And I don't care what you say, interior defensive lineman, eat a butt, eat a bug, and he's awesome. He's like one of my favorite players.
Yeah, you mentioned it with all those stats. You're like, oh, he's top of the league in this, top of the league of this. Like in every single category. There's some times where she's like, oh, that guy had a bunch of sacks that year, but he didn't really have a ton of QB hits, like a Kyler Fackrell. Like, yeah, he had 10 and a half sacks in the season, but he wasn't really getting to the QB a ton. He just he was transforming those into sacks almost every time. He does all of that. And then you mentioned in the run game, like the 14 tackles for a loss. And then you look at like some advanced like run stops, top of the league. And every single little thing. You combine sacks and tackles for a loss for the entire NFL, he's fourth after TJ Watt, Aaron Donald, and Hassan Reddick. He has 25 and a half when you put them together. So he plays the run very well. He plays the pass very well. And it wasn't just, people will be like, oh, he's not going to get 11 and a half sacks. That year is an outlier. You know what year was the outlier for Leonard Williams? It was 2019 where he got half a sack. That was the outlier year for Leonard Williams because he balls out every single year, and he was good with the Jets, and no, did he have an 11 and a half sacks, like this past year was a career year? No. But, he had 7 sacks one year, 5 sacks another year from the defensive tackle group, all while being consistent with the QB hits, with the run stops, with the tackles for a loss. Like, this dude is a baller, and he does it in every single way. Like, it's not just as a run defense. He's not just Dalvin Tomlinson where he plays the run and the nose tackle. And he's done it in every way. And, the contract's expensive, but every free agent's contract that's at the top of the league of their position is going to be expensive. Like, he is the top of the defensive. If it wasn't for Aaron Donald, who's going to be like a top 5 defensive player of all time, Leonard Williams would be one of the most talked about defensive tackles. Like, people would be talking about him at top of the league.
Yeah, I mean, if Leonard Williams can put together a 2020 Jace like year again, he's not going to enter the Aaron Donald discussion because nobody will ever,
and no one in the league right now will.
But like, there will be more of a conversation where Leonard Williams will join the party about, in terms of one of the best interior defensive linemen where, hey, he's the exception of, hey, you will throw some money at him, but he has to prove it. He has to prove it yet again this year. And I'm kind of not expecting that kind of year because that was such
11 and a half sacks.
Right. But also, and this is something I said it on Bleeding Blue, I said it on Talking Giants, looking back at the history of the game, and it tells you kind of more about how the game is formed and everything like that. That's disgusting. You see that spit that was just on my mouth? Neither here nor there. There was only 10 players in National Football League last year that had more than 10 sacks, Bobby. There used to be 30. In 1985, there were 30 players that had 10 plus sacks. That was one for every team. So just because you don't have a 10 sack year, if Leonard Williams this year doesn't have a 10 sack year, I'm still going to be looking at those QB hits. I'm still going to be looking at those pressures. Are you getting more than 27 QB hits? Are you getting, more than 40 pressures? That's the stuff that I'm going to be looking at. And that's what kind of based my evaluation in 2019 of this guy is getting pressure on the quarterback. He may not getting home, but he's getting pressure on the quarterback. 9 multi-hit QB hit games. Does that make sense? So yes. 9 games where he had more than 1 QB hit in 2020. And also, Bobby, I think one of the critiques of Leonard Williams is, sometimes he can have disappearing acts, right? You're sure, you're not going to get, an insane amount of pressure or sacks every single game. But 3 of our biggest wins last year, and we didn't win that many games last year, Bobby, but 3 of our biggest wins last year, Philadelphia home, Dallas home, week 17, and then Seattle was the biggest one of them all. Leonard Williams had 5 QB hits in each of those games. 5 QB hits. Seattle game where he had a game-winning sack where Leonard Williams called game. Dallas where he kind of called game on an Andy Dalton sack, but then they kind of battled back. But guess who got a QB hit on the Xavier McKinney interception?
Leonard Williams.
So he's a ball, not just kind of like, Justin being a spreadsheet Justin right now of like, hey, he just had a really good year, but he was good in the moments in which the Giants needed him. And again, I love him.
Well, and let's talk about, what is he going to do in 2021? Like, if he gets 6 or 7 sacks, it's not like, is this a regression? No, it's just like, that's kind of how sacks work sometimes. They're less predictive of than, tackles for a loss, QB hits, pressure, all that stuff. And people will say a lot during free agency, like, well, without Dalvin, he's not going to put the same production. Now, granted, Dalvin definitely helps. You know how many sacks he had without Dalvin or Dexter Lawrence on the field? 8. With both of them on the field, 2. And then he had 1 with Dexter Lawrence only on the field, and then 1 with only Dalvin Tomlinson. Most of them came with B.J. Hill on the field. So the idea that he was only getting those sacks because of Dex and Dalvin isn't true. And like we mentioned at the start, played the least amount of snaps of his career. If like I said, 2019, he missed the game because he got traded after the Jets had their bye and before the Giants had their bye. And Danny Shelton's going to do a good job with that nose tackle role. Dexter Lawrence should be better. So I can see maybe even Dexter Lawrence stealing a couple of sacks away from Leonard Williams. Austin Johnson will have an increased role while Danny Shelton will probably have a lesser role than Dalvin. But I do expect him to, you talked about it after free agency about him playing a little more. The more I thought about that, I would keep him around the same. Patrick Graham wants to keep his guys fresh. Look at all this production he did with playing 74% of the snaps. Keep him right around there. Yeah. Obviously, it could fluctuate a little bit, but I wouldn't be like, all right, Leonard Williams, you're playing 85, 90%. I'd keep him right around where he was at.
Yeah, where he typically was with the Jets is getting some 850, 870 snaps. And what he got with the Giants last year was about 800 snaps. So he was playing a little bit more. And why I say play more is because you're getting paid. Like, now it's not, no, you're not just on the franchise tag. Like, you're here, you got your guaranteed money, dude, and you're here for a couple years. Like, go out there, play, and ball out. So, even if I would be interested, maybe an interesting exercise to do after the 2021 season is doing it by rate. Like, he had this amount of pressures with this amount of snaps, and then next off season, depending on, if he does play more, and maybe my theory is correct, I would be interested to see the rate at which he gets pressure, QB hits, sacks, etc. But also why Leonard Williams could be, it's all, the writing is on the wall for there not to be a ton of regression. is because he did a lot of his damage from the inside. It's not like they were doing those 3 defensive lineman formation that I talked a lot about when we were doing our camp battle episode. But it's not like when they had those 3 defensive line formations, he was doing most of his damage, I feel like, from the inside. So if we run more 4 linebacker sets this year with 2 edge rushers on the outside, I still feel like Leonard Williams can be productive from the inside, even getting double teamed. I mean, there was a sack, I believe, that he had against Washington where he was just getting double teamed and he puts out that mammoth hand and he's just reaching. I mean, he just awesome. He fights through double teams. And I'm going to end every point that I'm going to end with Leonard Williams for the rest of this episode is I love him because I do.
Well, we can probably end it on there. Go out, have another good year, Leonard Williams. People saying, "Oh, it was a contract year." You know what? It was 2019 was a contract year too, and that's the year you had half a sack. Now, now if he has half a sack, I will be pissed.
Yeah, there's a line. Yeah. There is a line. How I mean, even if there's a bizarre world where he has half a sack again, and I'm still going to be a guy that's going to look at the pressures and look at the QB hits and just be like,
but our
hey,
DBs are way better than 2019, so there's
correct.
No excuse for it.
Correct. So
that's why it won't happen. It's just a made-up scenario that it will not happen. So continue to live your best life. Continue to rack up sacks, tackles for loss, QB hits, run stops, and fish hearts. So, all right, keep doing your thing, Leonard Williams. We'll see you guys next time. We appreciate you. Until then, let's go Big Blue.